Hey everyone, it's Connor here from Durham Hearing Specialists. I hope you're doing well, and welcome back to a very interesting case. What you see in this ear is the ear canal's a little bit swollen and a little bit irritated, but you'll see more of that later on. It'll become more obvious as we move through the case. And what you also see is this kind of white fibery stuff, and this is fungus. And I'm attempting to take a sample here, but I don't take a very good sample. In fact, I end up kind of smushing it, and I really wanted to look at it under the microscope immediately, rather than wait to colonize it and then stain it and so on and so forth. But I didn't really get a good sample. What type of fungus this is, not entirely sure. It doesn't really look like the sort of usual Aspergillus strain of fungus that you would normally see in an ear, particularly with a fungus that has aerial hyphae, which are the sort of outward sort of growing projections of the fungus. It doesn't really look like that. You can't really know for certain what strain of fungus is growing in the ear unless you put it under the microscope and maybe culture it, take a sample and have a look at the sort of morphology of the hyphae. And interestingly, most species of fungi are named based on how they look underneath the scope. So, for example, if you think about penicillium mold, okay, if you've not heard of that, you'll have definitely heard of it in some fashion because that's where the first antibiotic came from. Penicillin is derived from penicillium mold. And the reason for the name is because it looks like a little paintbrush underneath the microscope. So if you ever look at pictures of penicillium mold, it'll often be dyed or like stained with bluish stuff, but it looks like a little kind of 3 or 4 prong paintbrush. And penicillin, or penicillus is Latin for paintbrush. So and again, Aspergillus, which is what I mentioned earlier, the spore head or sporangium of an Aspergillus type fungi is like a ball and stick, and an aspergillum is like the ball and stick that a priest uses to sprinkle holy water over the congregation. So in any case, didn't get a good sample, but I'm not overly worried, to be honest. It's purely academic. So the real problem, as you can see, is that aside from the fungal infection, which tends to cause a lot of itching, and that's exactly what this patient reported, insatiable itching in the ear, which sort of has developed into a pain, and significant hearing loss. We see that there's wax compacted right down to the drum. Now, even though we've improved the situation a little bit, and we are down to the drum at this point, the hearing loss is still quite apparent. And the reason is that this patient has what we would call in fancy terms a neotympanum. Now what that really means is that there's just a fake eardrum overlaying the real eardrum, which is just dead skin, basically. So we're going to try and clear up this eardrum a little bit, and there's slime all over it. Once we kind of debulk the slime, we'll actually be able to peel off this fake eardrum, and that'll improve the hearing. Now we're not going to be able to get 100% of it, but if we can get rid of most of it, that will alleviate some of the hearing loss, and then we can send the patient around to the GP for some treatment. So a little bit of sodium bicarb, merely just to kind of give me some help here and just to kind of loosen up that slime. And of course that will make the neotympanum much easier to peel off. So we're going to start from the top here. Again, it's a little bit awkward because when you're working near the eardrum or on the eardrum, obviously it goes without saying, but you need to be extremely careful, and your movements have to be really slow and precise. But at the same time, it's very difficult to get the right angle. So if you see me kind of faffing around, that's because I'm trying to kind of alter my sort of body position to give me the best possible control. So I'm just kind of getting rid of all this debris here first, and then I'll go in and peel off the neotympanum. In terms of has the fungus caused this? Possibly. In terms of a general sort of inflammatory response of the ear canal can cause a kind of rapid cell turnover, so cause the skin of the ear canal to kind of rapidly reproduce and shed, and of course the migration system of the ear canal will be compromised as well. So we're peeling off this neotympanum here, and actually you can see that the tissue underneath, the tissue underneath is not very happy at all. So there's clearly otitis externa, or otomycosis, I guess. Let's just go with otitis externa, inflammation of the tissues of the external auditory canal. And you can clearly see that it's kind of red, it's wet, and it's unhappy. So you can see we do now have a more normal looking drum to an extent. It's kind of that bluish grey coloration. But again, patients had about as much as they can tolerate here. And they're not, they're tolerant, but they're not, getting to this stage is getting a little bit uncomfortable. Hearing is considerably better. Still not perfect, but again, once we send them round to their general practitioner doctor, they'll get some treatment, and then we'll see them for a follow-up in 2 weeks, and it should be, all back to normal. This is the other ear. Now, you can't really see it very well, but there is a little bit of fungal overgrowth in this ear as well. But it's not, it's not really a huge deal. We will mention it to the doctor, but it's not really a big deal. And I'm not entirely sure. I suppose the fungus kind of is pathogenic, really, because it has caused an inflammatory response in the other ear. At least I think that's the cause of the inflammatory response. But sometimes you can get fungus growing in the ear and it's not actually doing anything. And you may be thinking at this point, fungal overgrowth in an ear, that's wrong. That's a fungal infection that needs to be treated, that needs a flamethrower to it, and so on and so forth. But sometimes what you'll find is fungal overgrowth that's just kind of happily growing on and eating the wax and dead skin in the ear, and it's not actually causing any disease per se, or dysfunction or inflammation. But I suppose in this case, this fungus, whatever strain it is, it's probably the culprit. So we're just trying to get this wax that's actually wedged kind of right down near the eardrum. And it's kind of anchored in those recesses just before you get to the drum, those sort of inferior anterior recess. It's kind of hidden around the temporomandibular joint, or bulge of the temporomandibular joint. So we'll just try and convince this to come out. And again, patient should be a lot better off. Patient is a hearing aid wearer, which might give us a clue as to why there was fungal overgrowth in there. Again, if they're constantly sticking their hearing aid in their ear and the hearing aid has been left on surfaces and so on and so forth, and that's obviously a good way to transmit microorganisms into the ear canal. Again, we've opened a sort of can of worms here by trying to peel this sort of sheet of dead skin away. All I really wanted to do was just kind of get rid of it quickly because it was in the way, but we're sort of committed now to removing the whole thing. So we'll see if we can remove this, and once it's removed, not only will the hearing be considerably better, but also the performance from the hearing aid will be much improved. So you won't have all of that lovely amplification simply hitting the wax and reflecting off of it. There'll be a clear pathway down to the eardrum. So I'm using this new hook here, which I uploaded a video about it maybe 2 videos ago, and it's fantastic. So there we go. There's the ear blockage. So it's a little bit wet on the back end, but we'll have a look at the eardrum and see if there's any inflammation there. Go back in, and it's okay. But again, I rather suspect that it looks kind of dull and featureless because, again, it's got that neotympanum over it. So we're just going to tidy up a little bit of this dead skin and see if we can't improve the situation. But again, we're going to leave it up to the general practitioner doctor. Patient it's probably not a bad idea to apply the medicine in this ear as well, but we'll let the doctor decide. So as you can see, it's not that lovely greyish blue colour. It's actually kind of dull, sort of opaque, and I don't necessarily think that there's any sort of infection behind the drum or anything like that, which normally you would suspect if the drum looks dull or featureless. You'd expect something like otitis media or, middle ear effusion, which is not infected but is still otherwise effusion and kind of mucus sort of building up behind the drum, which we would call glue ear, particularly in children. But it doesn't look like that, and the patient isn't really symptomatic of that. So it's really just about tidying up here, and then the patient can receive the treatment they need. Further skin in the ear canal, and again, this is quite common with hearing aid users. You will see this sort of general ingression over time of wax and dead skin, and there's not a huge amount you can do about it actually, other than you can sort of maintain it a little bit with acetic acid or sodium bicarb, but it's not actually worth it. At least I find it's not really worth it because it's just going to cause them a problem in the long run, especially with their hearing aids. So there we go. I hope you found that video fun and informative. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comment section below and I'll try my very best to get back to you. And of course, I will see you guys on the next video.